One of the problems most mentioned by people living in Hawaii is the lack of affordable housing across all islands. Statewide, the median price of a house is reported at more than $600,000, and prices keep going up. What is not heard of very often is what's being done about the problem. Can the situation change? What will it take to make housing more affordable in Paradise? Insights looks at innovative housing solutions. Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Darrell Huff. The first line in an executive summary of a state report issued last summer says Hawaii has had an affordable crisis for decades in housing. The state recognized the problem as far back as 1970, but almost a half century later, a critical shortage of affordable housing not only continues to exist, it has grown to crisis proportions. The state has said more than 64,000 housing units are needed by the year 2025, most of those for low-income households. Governor Ige signed Act 127 2.5 years ago, aiming to build 22,500 affordable rentals by the end of 2026. Can government do this alone, or do we need innovative housing solutions to help? Our guests tonight include the chair of the Senate Housing Committee, an architect, and representatives of two organizations that are working in the community to solve the housing crisis. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email, call, or tweet your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now let me introduce our guest. Senator Stanley Chang, who represents East Honolulu, is the chair of the State Senate Housing Committee. Before being elected to the Senate, he served on the City Council for 4 years. Russell Wozniak is an architect and engineer who has worked on the design and construction of affordable housing projects. His architecture is focused on cost-effective structures using minimal and sustainable materials. Catherine Graham is the co-chair of Housing Now Coalition of Faith Action for Community Equity. The mission of the organization is to solve Hawaii's housing crisis, from proposing alternative dwelling units to making the public aware of the housing crisis. And TJ Joseph is the operations manager for Honolulu Habitat for Humanity, which partners with families who cannot afford a traditional loan or mortgage to build their own home or repair an existing house. With the agency's help, she and her husband and her family built their own house several years ago. Let me start with Senator Chang. You know, we just dropped some sort of big statistics about what we need to do, but also about how long this has been on people's radar and we still have a crisis. Why do you think that is?
Well, like you said, it's not a new issue. Back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, this was a time of high population growth. It was kind of an anything goes mentality when it came to development. Towers came up, new subdivisions, it was really easy. The voters of Hawaii then sort of realized, hey, wait a minute, we're paving over Paradise. And one by one, these things started to change. So the state and cities stopped building infrastructure. Now developers have to build it. And you know, it used to be that you could reclassify or rezone land for urban use very easily, and that's no longer true.
I've heard that said that the Save Our Sugar movement back in the 70s and 80s placed so much restrictions on land use that it took forever for the government to turn around and start to be able to build houses even on vacant agricultural land.
Yeah, I mean, we have an unusual state where there's two levels. There's a state level of land use regulation and also a county level of land use regulation, which is fairly unusual. And so it makes it that much harder. But it's not necessarily harder in a bad way. This is what the voters want, right? We don't want to be paving over too much agricultural or conservation land in the future.
Catherine Graham from Faith Action for Community Equity. What kind of work do you do, and how are you folks in touch with this housing crisis? What kind of people are you dealing with?
We started about 4 or 5 years ago now, having a housing summit at the Capitol, looking at this issue with all kinds of stakeholders who showed up, developers and legislators and people who needed housing. And from that experience, we decided we needed to create our own alternative kind of housing. And so we built a tiny little house out of a half of a shipping container and made it into 2 bedrooms that had bunk beds in it. And we parked it on the lawn at Honolulu Hale. Everybody came from City Hall as well as the Capitol to look at it, and they were impressed.
Let me ask you a question though. What's your impression of why people can't afford houses, other than just simply they're too expensive? Is it lack of choices?
I think that's it, and that's one of the things that we were trying to get at with this tiny home, is the idea that, and from this experiment, and we took it around then to 10 different churches after that over a 4-month period. The bill went through the City Council of accessory dwelling units, so that people could start putting tiny homes in their backyards or attach them to their houses or whatever. So that was one effort to get a little bit more housing at a different level of affordability. The other thing that we're looking at is, you were talking, Senator Chang, about 50s through the 70s, people just building all kinds of things, and we have these 3-story walk-ups that still exist in Mo'iliili, and it's like we had mom and pop developers back then. And maybe we could do that again if we got some good financing kind of tools in place where people could redevelop their own home somewhere and have a 3-story walk-up.
It's a perfect transition to T.J. Joseph from Habitat. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your particular experience. Why did you end up going this route, and what kind of process did you go through to build your own home?
So basically, when it comes to our programs at Habitat for Humanity, we have 3 things that we look for. So one is a need. For my husband and I, we had a need. We were living with parents for the longest time, and we love our parents, but we had an opportunity then to build our own home in Waimanalo, where I'm born and raised. Next is our income level. So we service the 30 to 60% of the area median income. And in the beginning, my husband and I, both full-time, working, employed. I was a preschool teacher. He was a city and county trash man. He still is. But then I was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer, being a mommy, and all that savings, I actually had him marry me, and we eloped to save money for a down payment so that we could qualify for that loan. But all of that money then went to pay for my bills. Wow. And then now that single income just couldn't allow us to get a traditional mortgage. So with Habitat's model, as long as you have stability and you're able to pay back the mortgage you're going to have with Habitat, and the third, you're willing to partner and build alongside with your volunteers, then that dream of home ownership can come true.
And so the financing comes through Habitat?
Yes, and we find multiple ways that we can help with that financing. If it's on Department of Hawaiian Homelands, sometimes we have access to NAHASDA funding. If the project is in a rural area, we have access to USDA rural. But basically, we try to meet that family where they're at and focus on that financial stability so that they can make sure that not only are we in that efforts to make that home affordable, but they know that this is what they want.
One last question, how did the land figure in? How did you acquire the land?
So for me, fortunately, my father-in-law was on the list for the Department of Hawaiian Homelands in the 1960s, and we were only awarded it in 2006.
So you had an empty lot, basically.
We were lucky to have an empty lot, but many of our families come because they now inherited the home that was built back in the day that's falling around them, and they can't go and get a loan to build construction for a brand new home. So that's where we come in and we can help them.
Okay, Russell Wozniak, what got you into this field, and how are you feeling about how it's going?
Well, actually, I'm quite optimistic, really. I always worked in construction. I worked in building houses, but it just didn't make sense to me to be building fancy houses and drive by Tent City or Blue Tarp City or people living in squalor down the street. So it was really a focus of mine for quite some time to really try to make a dent in this need. And really, it's in the last 5 or 10 years, I didn't think the attitude in the community would change. But in the last 5 years, I can honestly say I think it has changed, and it's changed for the better. And I think it comes from the community, really.
What did it change from and then to?
It changed from, I felt that there was a resistance or maybe a lack of the community recognizing that this is an issue and it can actually be tackled. There could be positive change. And now I feel that there is this momentum, there is the attitude that, okay, we've seen projects come out, we've seen positive impacts, we've seen people get better or be better off with this step up, this hand up, not a hand out. And it's quite gratifying to see. And I think that is paving the path for more projects in the future. I think the last 5 years, maybe 10 years even, we've seen these projects, and I think there should be more to come. So I'm quite excited about that.
Senator Chang, in terms of, again, your observations, it seems to me that an awful lot of the housing development, or almost all housing development in the last couple of decades, has been in the private sector, leaving the private sector, encouraging developers, trying to extract some kind of affordability out of their projects. Has that worked, or do you think that there needs to be more dramatic intervention in the market?
It hasn't worked. Think about it like cars. We are like Cuba. There are artificial political restrictions placed on the supply of new cars. The supply is way lower than demand, so a 1955 Chevrolet becomes really valuable and available only to the very rich. But we would never go to Mercedes-Benz and say, you know what, you have to now sell 30% of your inventory for $10,000 a piece. What we would do is we would allow supply to rise to meet demand, and then the brand new Mercedes might be expensive, but the 20-year-old Mercedes becomes affordable. And that's what we need to do for housing. We need to ensure that supply rises to meet demand. The only problem, supply is really controversial. We don't want to be sprawling over agricultural land. We don't want to be profiteering off public lands. We don't want wealthy overseas investors snapping up all the inventory. And so we have to find a way to achieve new inventory, new supply, and meet every single one of these very legitimate objections.
Russell Wozniak, what do you see as the big cost drivers in building a house? I mean, that's a good point for the big market, but I mean, what costs so much more here that would cause our houses to cost so much? Or is it just the market that forces those prices up?
Obviously, generally, labor is that much more, the shipping in of materials, but there's a base cost to building. If you're gonna build something, if you're gonna build 1 square foot of interior space, it's going to cost X dollars. And you can put the lower grade materials and the cheap refrigerator in and all the saving ideas you can. It's only going to get so low. At some point, you just have to shrink your square footage, and that's what we've done in the past. Okay, we're going to try to build smaller. We're going to recognize that every square inch counts. It's not every square foot anymore because it's $500 a square foot at times. So every little bit counts, and the big drivers, it can be any number of things, and it depends on the sites, depends on the conditions, but a lot of it is labor, a lot of it is material, and one thing that people don't recognize is the utilities. They can say, okay, the building costs this, we're still building stick frame or whatever it is, CMU block, but oh, wait a second, we've got water and sewer to contend with, and off-site improvements and whatnot.
And then they're permitting. There are all the steps that developers have to go through with government that drive the prices up.
You know, we did get a call from a caller in Kaneohe who thinks that the military should not pay members to live off base. We've heard this before, that the military housing allowances are so generous that it forces up the market. What do you folks think about the effect of these outside forces, say the military or offshore investors and stuff? Waimanalo, at least, you don't have a lot of that, do you? Or do you find these pressures in Waimanalo?
Yes, we do. We have Bellows Air Force Base that they do training. I can actually hear their training from our home. So to some extent, my children ask what that is, and I said, they're here to protect us. So there can be that kind of feeling towards that. I think in regards to just one of the biggest issues for us in Waimanalo is that hidden homeless, where there's multiple generations living in a home that's falling apart. And exactly like Russell said, it's not only the price of that home, but that labor cost that can be huge. So even for us at Habitat, that's the one thing that we're blessed with, is that volunteer base. And because of that volunteer labor, that's what can cause our prices of our homes to be 40% less than what's on the market. But a lot of that volunteer labor comes from our military. Active military as well. So it's always that balance. And for homeowners like myself, born and raised in Waimanalo, to have an active military person come out and help me build on a Saturday is phenomenal. And for a lot of them, they are only stationed here for so long. So they're here to also experience what it means to have a family and to be that. So some of those volunteers will be there regularly on a Saturday. We move in, they pull up, honk their horn, we welcome them in. So it's that balance. So I hear that.
Good,
that's
nice
one of the
goodwill,
issues.
though. I mean, that really does sound like a nice story. Senator Chang, though, I mean, do you find as a policymaker that people come in and they want to blame everybody else for the problem?
Absolutely. But like I said, they have really real issues. We don't want to be taking away agricultural land. We don't want to be selling all of our inventory to overseas investors. We want to be intensely using the existing transportation infrastructure that we have. You know, we don't want to take anything away from anyone. We want to take care of local residents. We don't want to encourage speculation. And so far, a lot of the proposals have not really met those needs. And so what we did is we really sat down, considered each of these potential objections, which have, I think, very rightly stymied a lot of development in Hawaii, and met every one of them with our new plan, SB1, the Aloha Homes plan. We'll be creating high-density towers of new affordable housing on existing state-owned lands near the rail station, the Honolulu rail stations, and selling them at cost, no profit, and also no taxpayer subsidy to Hawaii residents who will be owner-occupants, who will not be able to make windfall profits when they resell on the secondary market.
So go into that a little bit more. I saw a picture of the Singapore model that you talked about before. It's really tall. It looks really dense. The units are pretty small, as I recall. How do you convince people that this is where they should be living? What is it that gets them in there and willing to buy when there is competition out there?
Daryl, we were talking about how you're an empty nester. At some point, you will want to be able to take an elevator and not a car to the pharmacy, the grocery store, the doctor. That kind of high-density residential living, I think, is going to be very attractive to empty nesters. If you have kids who are on the mainland or overseas, only $300,000 for a 3-bedroom unit. That's going to be all included. They're going to be able to move back here, they're going to be able to live here and raise a family in a unit that's large enough to accommodate.
Let me ask Rosie, when you hear $300,000 per unit, is that realistic? And what kind of a building do you
It makes me think of 2002, when that was the last time I've seen that number. Mm-hmm. And I think it has to be largely government subsidized, or else cost per square foot, or it's a postage stamp size apartment. Something's got to give. So to build a 500 square foot, say, apartment for that is and try to make a profit. I know you're saying there's no profit, but it just doesn't happen. So there has to be government, or there has to be something financial.
I guess the question becomes how do you get that built if there is no profit? Let me just put that to you.
Well, the government could do it, or you could have a public-private partnership. But there are advantages that we're going to have. We're going to have zero-cost land. We're going to have very, very high density, so you're going to have economies of scale. Building new infrastructure for 10,000 units. Say we took McKinley High School, largely demolished it, and put 20 towers with 10,000 units on top of McKinley High School. The infrastructure for 10,000 units is going to be way cheaper per unit than if we did 1,000 units. Right? So there's going to be a lot of different efficiencies of scale.
Go ahead.
Well, I just think the idea, Senator Chang's ideas are valuable because we need a lot of creative thinking. And
we need big ideas.
We do. And one of the things that Faith Action is becoming more and more aware of, and it's maybe because we're slow, but is how much money is being taken out of the state of Hawaii. I mean, I feel like we're just being drained by our offshore investors who invest in Hawaii and into these real estate investment trusts like Ala Moana Shopping Center or the hotels or some of the office buildings downtown. And they make money, these investors, but they don't pay any income tax to the state of Hawaii. And so we are losing about $50 to $60 million, estimated, a year from these people who are making money off of Hawaii that could be going into the development of affordable housing for the lower income people.
Let me ask you, Catherine Graham, though, from FACE, what is your folks' model? What solution would you guys put forward?
Well, what we're trying to do right now is get more money into the rental housing revolving fund, and we're trying to do it by a REITs, the real estate investment transaction tax. We're trying to do it by raising the conveyance tax on the sale of houses over $2 million. Right now, again, people who sell a house and make money over $2 million, they're paying something like 2%, to the state, and which is, in other places they pay more like 5 or 6%. The higher the sales are. And the more money we would get into the rental housing revolving fund, the more money we could actually use to subsidize housing. Even though Senator Chang's model is not subsidized, we need lots of different models. And so to be able to subsidize housing at the 30 to 60% of area median income is really important.
I want to go back to TJ for a second, because I actually got a couple of calls specifically about Habitat and about Hawaiian Homes. And they're pretty tough questions, but I'll give you a shot.
Okay.
So one was, the Hawaiian Homelands program seems to be broken with thousands waiting for land. How important do you think it is from your experience? Do you think there's a lot of potential there to get more people onto that land?
Yes, I absolutely agree that there is more potential. Depending on where that land is always the case. If you look at the history of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands and Oahu, because we had so many pineapple plantations, it's different. The amount of residential properties here is limited. But like Russell explained, back in the day, one of your parcels of land for Hawaiian Homestead was a large parcel. My parcel is about 5,000 square feet, which is a large parcel for a family who was living in one bedroom, and all the kids slept on the bed and we slept on the floor. So in regards to our Habitat model, the homes that we build are according to HUD guidelines. So I have 4 children, my husband and I, we have a 3-bedroom home. 2 boys share, the 2 girls share, and I have my home. But like you said, that size house is what I can afford. And my rental, not my rental, but my mortgage, according to HUD guidelines, is no more than 30 to 40% of what I'm actually bringing in.
Given what Senator Chang is talking about and what Russell Wozniak mentioned, it seems like people have to adjust their expectations a little bit in this world. How difficult was it for you to go from probably living in sort of a sprawling, larger house most of your young life to be in that compact situation?
Well, it was kind of the opposite.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so our home with my brothers and sisters, so I had my 1 bedroom, and then as I grew with my family, we all were living in the 1 bedroom.
Okay.
So for the first month, my children actually slept in our bedroom when they had their own bedrooms, because
So the house you built feels like the Taj Mahal
it
now.
does. So it's all perspective. So a lot of times people go, oh, but that's not your dream home. And I'm like, but it's the dream of home ownership. And that's what you understand when you actually set your goal and you have a home that is secure and stable, and then you can pay for that. The dream of anything else is possible. But it's really looking at the different, like,
we've got a picture of your house up there.
Oh, thank you.
And what kind of choices did you have to make? Like if they put in front of you, here's a choice between this and this is what it costs. What kind of things did you say give up, and what did you get that you thought was the best stuff you got?
So for us at Habitat is a very, all the things you see there is things that you can get from Lowe's or Home Depot, because we want to make that home affordable. The things that you get to choose are like colors of, do you want tile or linoleum flooring, what color cabinetry you want. But if you, for us, we didn't even know we had a choice. It was fabulous to have a choice. Biggest thing was, what color is your house going to be? And my husband said he wanted blue. So I said, absolutely. So later on, when we buy something, like a car, I can say, I get to choose the color now. That's the color of the house.
So Russell Wozniak, let's go into this a little bit more. Assuming you get some land, what do you see as the kind of models for affordable construction? We've already talked about how expensive it is to do the way they do it now. What kind of stuff have you been looking at? What kind of things do you think are in the future?
Well, I've been fortunate enough to be involved in a number of projects that were more experimental, stepping out of the box and just seeing if there's a different way to do things. And we've done modular projects, and modular has its benefits in terms of time, but I'm not sure that it is. It's not. Speaking of expectations, we're not halving the price of cost of square footage. It is getting something here. It's getting something built right away.
But let me understand. That's in an emergency kind of situation as opposed to.
Well, actually,
When you say modular, I don't think every person knows
I guess
right away what modular.
modular it could mean a number of things, but in this case, it is built off-site, shipped on with a truck, and so say it's built in a factory or built locally or typically on the mainland on the West Coast, and it could be shipped in, brought to the site on a truck, and in the case of the project we did in Waianae, we had 16 modular units put out in, I would say, about a month. So you go from having a bare site to essentially a completed livable site within maybe 2 or 3 months.
How much savings is there just in the time you've now saved?
There's savings, I would say, depending on what you build, it can be actually more costly to build. However, you save on labor costs, which is not something that is going to keep everybody happy. The labor unions are not going to like that.
Except in some cases, they need housing too.
Sure, of course, yeah.
And so they've gotten a little bit more flexible in what they're not going to fight against, I think.
So I think it's a great stopgap idea, and it can be utilized in different ways. We can bring in modular pre-built structures. I'm just not sure that that's the way to go. And I think that looking at different projects, even the house in Waimanalo of yours, looking at something like that, very simply but code compliant building,
Yes.
and looking at simplifying the structure. Everything's on 8-foot or 4-foot grid, and just simplifying everything. Nothing fancy, but a completed house that's going to be standing for decades. It's not a temporary thing. I think that's one approach to it. I'm not, Senator Chang's idea of building sort of a walkable, larger, that's a macro idea, that's a macro scale, and I love it actually. I think that's a great way to bring so much housing in. But on the micro scale, the short term, these ideas of building efficiently small units, like house or modular units, is one way to do it.
Let me give Senator Chang a continuing chance to explain this model that you have. What pays for the money to build these projects?
Well, there's a couple ways you can do it. Probably the easiest way to do it would be through a public-private partnership model, where the state goes out to the developers and says, all right, here's the criteria, here's the parcel, no more than this is the cost, no more than this is the sticker price to the consumer. You have to have this number of square feet per unit, this number of amenities. You bid and tell us, what you're going to do, and then let the state choose from several different competitors and say, we like this design, that design is, not good enough. And that's one way to do it without fronting a single taxpayer dollar. It would be all of the costs for development would be fronted by the private sector.
Because the individual owners are going to buy those units.
Correct, and that cost to sell, the $300,000, is going to include all of the costs of development, the infrastructure, the actual construction, the planning, the design, and so forth.
How many people would have to live, how many units would you have to have in, say, a 10-acre area to make that pencil out?
So back to McKinley High School, it's 43 acres. 801 South Street is 2 towers on 4 acres, 1,000 units, so that's about 250 units an acre. If you, again, demolished much of McKinley High School, you could put 20 towers and 10,000 units.
I just hear the screams.
I know, all the alumni of
But you know what?
McKinley High
The
School.
alumni, the staff, the faculty, the students, they would get first crack at these units. So there's something in it
They
from
still
them
have
too.
to go to school somewhere.
But you can put into these towers brand new state-of-the-art vertical high schools, middle schools, elementary schools, preschools. And they would be paid for, again, by the cost of the units.
You're visioning a pretty dramatic change in the urban lifestyle that Honolulu is accustomed to. Let me just throw all of you, do you guys think people would buy that? What do you think, TJ?
I think that there's a variety of people. For example, in Maui, Habitat did build a multi-unit because for some families, it's much easier the accessibility to that, being able to repair what's in your home without worrying about the exterior of your home. I know my oldest son, will probably want to live in some kind of apartment because he's so over cutting grass every weekend as his chore. So I think, especially where jobs are located, if there was an ability where if that's where you can get a higher paying income and live in a home, that might be what a lot of our future generation might be looking for.
Catherine Graham, from Face's perspective, he's talking about a for sale model for the most part.
Right.
Do you feel like most of the people that you deal with could afford it even at that level of pricing? Or?
Well, I think the for sale model is important, and I think we still need a lot of rental housing. And that's where the government subsidies, I think, come in, where we need rental housing for the people at the lower levels of median income.
Is that part of your package?
We're going to be doing a lot with these, with the bills that Catherine's mentioned, and I'm happy to support all of them. The simple truth is, with $50 million a year and a need of 65,000 units, it's going to take 200 years to build that need between now and just the need over 10 years. So it's not enough. We need to be thinking on a scale of tens of thousands of units. So Aloha Stadium, 100 acres, 50 towers, 25,000 units. You could make a big difference with that. If you did 8 units per acre, you would need 8,000 acres. And I don't know of any plot of 8,000 acres where the voters of Hawaii would be like, let's develop.
Russell Wozniak, as an architect, are there models that do approach that kind of density and that scale that are less expensive to build than, say, the way we build a typical 801 South kind of project now?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is the SRO model, the single room occupancy model, like a dorm room, where that's one way to automatically bring price down. If you have a space that is, even if you had to think of your dorm room, but even if you had your own bathroom and sink, it makes for a pretty comfortable place. And then you share the kitchen
down the hall.
So all of a sudden you take your maybe 400 square foot place and you turn it into a 200 or maybe 180 square foot place. It sounds small, but it's actually quite comfortable for 1 or 2 people. And you've got shared space down the hallway, or shared living room, or shared lanai space, or just overlapping space, period, is going to bring price down. And so that's one strategy we've done in the past, and that's
and you've done it here in Honolulu?
Yep, we've done it here, but architects have thought of that all across the nation, and it's
Well, I mean, that's
it's
certainly
not for all, but
right. No, but it's certainly one of the issues here is that, like HHFDC, the Hawaii Housing Finance and Development Corporation, is not able.
I don't think I hear anybody who gets that acronym right.
Did I not say it
No,
right?
no, it's good. I was impressed. I could
okay.
never remember the names of that acronym.
But I think they have said in the past that we can't do SROs because they can't subsidize it at a federal level. And so that doesn't make any sense, because that's what we need for a lot of our homeless population, I think, is they don't want an apartment that they have to keep clean and cook for themselves, but a more communal situation where they just have a bed that, in a room that they can sleep in and a bathroom that they can, use. I think that's what we need. Mm-hmm. But there doesn't seem to be any way at this point that government can help with that.
TJ, from Habitat for Humanity, using the Habitat model, does it have the potential to add a lot of units for people, or does it tend to be one at a time and very slow and very labor intensive, or can you see it generating a lot of houses?
Yes, so like I had mentioned earlier, the MOE did a multi-unit project, and I'm not sure how many. I want to say it was more than a dozen in their multi-unit. So even for us on Oahu, we have very limited ability for land. Mm-hmm. But if we had the opportunity to have a piece, we would be able to make a multi-unit model. But what's great is our homeowners still participate in their sweat equity. Mm-hmm. So they're still learning and building. In a multi-unit sense, there's limited things that they're able to do, but they're also always able to help with someone else's home.
So in a multi-unit system, you still need a contractor to come from outside and do the structure, the infrastructure, and so on.
Yes.
It's not something that not something I could go dig a ditch like that and stuff.
So true. And some of our Habitat affiliates are general contractors already. So it just depends on where we are at and how we can help with that. But we're always trying to look every which way, even the possibility of making ADUs, because say if you're in a living situation, but my property is big enough and grandma wants to come and live with us, then maybe that's an ability that we can work with. But it's really trying to look at our families and see where we meet with them so that we can deal with the issue of housing.
So self-help housing on larger lots that have a little bit more room, an ADU, instead of, what is an ADU running now? I mean, they're pretty expensive.
They're not
actually.
cheap. $100,000 would be, it wouldn't be a surprise if you had.
For like a 2-bedroom, 600 or 700 square foot ADU?
That would be a decent size ADU. You know, 400 is still livable and a decent size.
But that's $100,000.
$100,000 by the time you get it there, and that's the other thing. You can put a cost per square foot on this ADU, but then what is each individual lot contending with? Do they have a slope? Is it rock? They've got a trench-in sewer line, water line, so those prices can vary dramatically.
So I've got a lot of calls. I'm just sort of randomly going through these at this point because there's a lot of interesting questions here. I appreciate our viewers for this. Susan from Waikele asks, and I think this might be directed toward you, Senator, how will our environment, clean lifestyle be protected? More homes means more trash, sewer, water, and electricity. These big, dense projects need a lot of infrastructure support.
They do. But the secret is with density, you get to really minimize all of those environmental impacts. So if you're on the rail line, well, guess what? You don't need as many parking stalls. You're not going to have as many cars.
We need a rail.
I agree.
I mean, it's not happening yet.
I agree. But we also need ride share, car share, bike share, and so forth.
All options.
The Gates Foundation just announced their new magical composting toilets. Guess what? We're not going to have as much need for wastewater treatment. With efficiencies of scale, you can do almost anything.
You know, the question that did pop up along those same lines is the other states, other places, have they tried this high level density? I guess big cities for the most part.
Well, again, Daryl, this is an existing project. 801 South Street is 2 towers, 4 acres, a density of 250 units an acre. So it's actually the same density that we already have. Another thing you might not know, Daryl, Honolulu actually already has the 4th most skyscrapers in the United States.
It doesn't surprise me, but that's pretty amazing when you think about we have a very dense urban area already.
Outside of New York, very, very few other American cities have people living in high rises.
What are your thoughts about that? The idea that you've got the more people you put in one place, the more dense our urban area gets, the more dirty it gets.
I think, I don't know if the more dirty it gets, I think it's probably on the contrary, because if we have that much population we're trying to serve, and if we have a walkable place with the high density, we're dealing with less cars and supposedly or hopefully more bicycles and walking.
You know, just recently there was a proposal made by a developer to do what you just said, not nearly as much, but at Halava, the Transnoria developer came in and proposed, I can't remember, several towers, and immediately, and with less parking because it's on the rail. And immediately the neighbors nearby say, wait a minute, those people are all going to still have their cars and they're going to be parking in my neighborhood, they're going to take away our parking spaces. You know, how important is the transportation component to an affordable housing strategy?
No, it's huge. It's absolutely huge because right now we're looking at around $50,000 a parking stall for a structured parking stall.
Why is that?
That is, if you add up all the concrete, all the labor, everything.
Concrete.
And
parking stalls you could live in a parking stall if it had walls.
Yeah.
I know. I could just put up a curtain, you know.
That's valuable vertical square footage that could be used otherwise, not to mention driving up the cost, right? So if all of a sudden you've got a unit that doesn't need a parking stall, it's $50,000 saved, right? So yeah, that's critical, and just the efficiency in general of having less cars on the street and more public transportation.
And let's remember the bottom line here. The reason we need urban density is to keep the country country. Otherwise, the alternative is finding 8,000 acres every 10 years and paving them over. And that is something that we are not willing to do.
Interesting question. How do we accommodate the cultural differences that exist in our society when designing and developing housing? You know, your project was, the model you used in explaining it was the Singapore model, where I don't know how diverse Singapore is, but do we have issues when we have this incredibly diverse culture here with everybody living on top of each other. I think that's maybe a little bit about what this question is about.
Singapore actually has 3 major ethnic groups, and there's been a long history of ethnic tension and racially based riots in that country. So actually the reason they have so much public housing, remember this is the land of crazy rich Asians, the reason they have so much public housing is because they want to integrate the races so that they live side by side. One thing I observed is actually in Hawaii, where 45% of the population is mixed in some way, it did not occur to me that in a place like Singapore, half the size of Oahu, that people could live side by side for hundreds of years and not do what humans do, that is make babies. In Hawaii, somehow we figured that out in a way that most of the world, including Singapore, has not. So we're actually way ahead.
They
They
don't
live integrated. They may be integrated.
They are
physically.
integrated because there are quotas on every floor of public housing, no fewer than this number of Chinese, this number of Malays, and this number of Indians.
Yeah, and you certainly couldn't do that here.
No.
You wouldn't need
Well,
to.
we wouldn't need
Well,
to.
we have fair housing. You can't do that
Right.
here.
Another question that did come in is why can't home ownership be restricted to Hawaii residents? When foreign investors buy out the inventory, we price out our own families. You just described a fairly strict regimen, and we talked earlier about limiting the resale opportunities for these units so they're not just bought and then all of a sudden they go price crazy. What kind of restrictions do we need to make to ensure that from a regulatory point of view, from a market point of view, that we're able to build affordable housing that's going to stay affordable?
Well, I actually agree 100% with that caller. That's why for our program, we would have these criteria: Hawaii resident, owner-occupant, owns no other real property. Strictly enforced, face recognition, fingerprint scans, retina scans, you name it. We can enforce this pretty close to 100% these days. But here's what I wouldn't have, Daryl. I would not have any type of first-time homebuyer restriction. Because guess what? There are empty nesters who may own a home. As long as they dispose of their existing home, they'll be able to move in. And guess what? I wouldn't also have any type of income restrictions. Because if you're an empty nester, you know what? Don't we want socioeconomic integration? We want rich and poor living side by side. It should be for all residents of Hawaii, not just the very rich or the very poor. It should be for everybody.
Continuing on the same theme of restricting the market, I guess, caller's 89 years old on Maui. She questions if this problem will ever be solved with people moving here from the mainland, including expats who have moved away from Hawaii. What do you folks think about that? Do you think that there's any way of restricting the number of people that are going to come here?
It seems like it's unconstitutional. We are still part of the United States at the moment. I'm not sure how long that'll last if, we get more excitement from Hawaiian sovereignty folks. But I think that we're not legally able to restrict that. And I've been here 40 years, but I know the first person I met when I got off the plane said, "Oh, we don't want you, go back." And you're not going to stay.
Aloha.
Yeah, and you probably won't stay very long anyway. And I went, "Oh, okay," but so I've proven
what's
her
the
wrong.
sentiment among the folks that you work with, and you did mention how the military folks, who some people blame for higher housing, are there working side by side with you building your house. But I mean, is there a sense out there that as we struggle to find affordable housing, that there's tension between different groups of people, newcomers, longtime residents, locals, and so on? Do you feel it out there?
I do feel it, and as born and raised here on the island and Native Hawaiian, with our history and our culture and what has happened, it is and can be difficult. So that's where I try to empower my staff as well as my children to know what that history is and to always have that understanding. And when we talk about people coming back to the island, a lot of it was people like my siblings or my cousins who unfortunately left to go and get higher education and then couldn't find their way back because it's so difficult to find. But they have expertise that they can bring back to our islands and make it better. So it's always going to be difficult living on an island and that island mentality, but we need to find a way to collaborate with one another. We need to find a way to help everyone in the different situations that they are and to come together to do that. It's not going to be one solution, but we need to always have respect and understanding for one another so that we can work together for that future cause.
This is directly for Senator Chang along the same theme. Is the legislature doing anything to limit foreign buyers who drive up the cost of housing?
Well, we have a number of measures this year, not just the SB 1 bill that I've been talking about, but another one. To exempt from inclusionary zoning requirements, any building where the covenants will in perpetuity require that the residents, the buyers, be Hawaii residents who are owner occupants and own no other real property.
Okay, I need you to roll back a little bit less of the stuff that
Jargon.
I didn't quite get. So when you say you won't have inclusionary zoning requirements, what does that mean?
Basically, that's where you tell the developer, no matter how much it costs to build this unit, 30% of these units have to be affordable to a certain lower than market group of people.
Which is the prominent market in the for sale
Which is most
realm.
people.
Right. No, but I mean, that's the prominent model that's being used to try and generate affordable housing in the for sale realm right now.
It's prominent because it's used in places like Kaka'ako where there is a lot of development.
But so, again, getting back here, no, so finish explaining that, I'm sorry. So you'd let someone build a building, you wouldn't require an affordable housing component, but what was the next thing you said?
All right, so there are a couple of concerns, right? We need more housing that people can afford, right? But we also need housing that local people are going to have access to. So what we would say is let's roll back some of those restrictions that are price-based, and instead, if the building is available only to Hawaii residents who will be owner occupants and own no other real property, in other words, a true Hawaii resident who is not an investor in any definition, that they will be exempt from some of the strict requirements that we have. And if the developer thinks there's a market for $1 million condos that Hawaii residents who are owner occupants and own no other real property, then that would be their choice.
Oh, I'm starting to understand. Russell Wozniak, what do you think of that kind of idea? How do you think that would affect the marketability of a place like that?
The marketability, I think Senator Chang is right. I think if you can build to the market, if you're building to what the market is asking, the market is not asking for 200% AMI. It's asking for something lower.
AMI is the
Area
income.
median income.
Area median, yeah. And so I agree with Senator Chang. I think that addressing that and focusing the development market or letting the market focus on what the demand is and gearing it towards the folks that are truly local, truly fit that
Single property owners.
yeah, single property owner, yeah.
And so I understand that would be a way of, on a project by project basis, excluding the offshore buyer.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, some more questions. Who determines the affordable housing criteria? The general public considers it a joke when government officials start to promote a new affordable housing project that local residents still can't afford. I think that's another government question. What do you think?
So the SB1 proposal that we're doing, the Aloha Homes proposal, $300,000 is written into the bill. According to the federal government, that means it's affordable to people making 53% of the area median income, or for a family of four, that's $62,000. So that means if mom and dad each make $31,000, which I understand many people in our community do not make, but we are now talking about folks who might be bus drivers, bartenders, school teachers, people who are in the working class. This would then be within reach for them.
May I jump in on that? Having been involved in city and state projects, we've had units put out there, they're produced, and people that are local people that are that lower area median income band are in there. And that's a testament to the need that's there. And so I disagree with that comment. It's not something that the public should be saying, oh, this is, it's not happening. It's happening. There's projects out there. I just don't think there's enough. So having more out there, people are housed. People have been housed in these city and state projects, but the demand is there and people are living in these
And are these for
subsidized
sale
houses.
projects? Or
These are rental.
rentals?
These are rental houses.
So how to get more rental projects on the market is the
Rental
issue.
or for sale, I think.
Well, we've been talking a lot about for sale, and I think that there are a lot of people who can't even
Your
afford the
system wouldn't allow
$300,000.
people to rent out their units, even long-term, right?
Correct.
And why not?
Because there's a very real concern about short-term vacation rentals that are gobbling up a ton of housing stock in Hawaii. there's also a real concern about giving opportunities to people who are not going to be investors. And as for renters, I actually completely agree that we need more rental subsidies. The problem is in this country, during the Great Society years under Lyndon Johnson, the 60s, 70s, there was a lot of money going into subsidized rentals. When the Republican majorities took over in the Reagan years, all of that got slashed. And so in terms of new subsidized, public housing rentals built in the last 30 years in Hawaii, very, very few.
Well, not public housing, but there still are subsidized housing. I mean, the HHFDC does subsidize developers to develop lower income housing.
Aren't the subsidies, though, when they build, and forgive me because this is getting above my pay grade again, but my understanding is with a lot of these rental projects, there's a multiplicity of financing methods
Right.
that all get patched together.
Right.
And so that at the end of the day, the rental is enough to pay for the ongoing management and payment of the debt.
That's the ideal.
Okay, so
Right.
that's the hope of the Rental Housing Trust Fund, that it provides that money that can help finance rentals primarily. Do you see a lot of hope for that, building a lot of units that way? And is there a competition when you start talking about, oh, here's a great parcel of land, I want to build this really big for sale project, but then, well, what about the rental project? How do you balance those things?
I don't think we need to make that choice. I think we can have both. The issue is the average subsidized unit takes about $140,000 each unit in taxpayer subsidies. And I agree that these programs are fantastic, all these different programs that you mentioned, but at the end of the day, all of those dollars are coming from taxpayers. And if you applied that to the 64,000 unit demand, it would cost $11.5 billion. That is almost the size of the entire state budget. There's just no way that we can tax and spend our way out of this housing shortage.
Anybody else want to pitch in on that one? Okay, so Senator
it's a
Chang, I
mess.
knew this would happen as soon as you said it. I've got 3 questions from outraged McKinley High School folks. And I think this kind of goes to when you start turning land over into housing, you're going to step on some toes in some places. Does Stanley Chang realize McKinley High School is on the state and national historic registry? Tell Senator Chang he will have a fight with McKinley High alumni. And there's some powerful McKinley High alumni. And callers appalled that he would suggest tearing down McKinley High School, the oldest school in the state. Shame on you. But I think you're using that as an example of a plot of land. People do understand the size of it, and this is what we can do.
Correct.
You're not suggesting we're
The
going
bill
to tear
doesn't
down.
have any specific parcels in it. It's just an example of a land in a highly urbanized core with aging facilities. So what if I told you that every single facility was removed, would be replaced with every single square foot replaced with a brand new state-of-the-art vertical school, plus additional high school, middle schools, elementary schools, and preschools for all the new families moving in, plus existing faculty, staff, alumni, students who would get first crack at these very reasonably priced units.
Anyway, check your social media when you get home. But in terms of that issue, though, of my backyard, what if in Waimanalo there was a 5-acre parcel and someone came in and said, oh, we're going to build 3 200-foot towers?
That's why it's always so important to go to your community. And I'm born and raised in Waimanalo. My community is very unique, but I can't go into Kaneohe when we're building a Kaneohe house and have any idea that I know what that community is about. And the people who know best about their communities, people who live there, because they have invested, which is one of the great parts of home ownership. Because when you're a homeowner, that's building strong, stable families and strong, stable communities. You're giving back to your community. When we're building our home, all of those volunteers, it takes that community to build that house, and that's the collaboration that needs to work. So it's really like not just, oh, we talk to the community, but really Auntie who lives down the street was like, I never ever heard about that. You really have to make that grassroots effort and educate your community and find the different ways, even for us, finding different ways to communicate in many different levels. Our generation is getting smarter and more tech savvy, so finding ways that we all can speak that same language.
Let me ask you, though, have you seen pushback on the concept when there've been discussion about we're going to put an affordable rental project here? What's the usual community response?
Yeah, it's always a NIMBY response. I think you worked on the project in Makiki. for the city and county. They took a school that was no longer used and put it, turned it into homeless, apartments for formerly homeless families. The community was 100% against it, and I think that's just a normal response. And Faith Action is an organization that goes out and talks to people and tries to reason with them, and listen to their concerns, because that's very important. And as people are able to really voice all their concerns, they can even hear sometimes how they're fear-based and probably not very accurate. So that's where we are very effective in community organizing.
Russell, when you've seen projects, how much is getting community input important to?
This is such a big thing. So we joke.
You have 15 seconds to answer.
That's it. And what we've done in the past is going to the community and saying, what do you guys think? Right off the bat, first step.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, all of you, and mahalo to all of our viewers for joining us tonight. And we thank our guests, Senator Stanley Chang, Housing Committee Chair for the State Senate, Catherine Graham, Housing Now Coalition of Faith Action for Community Equity, Russell Wozniak, architect and engineer, and TJ Joseph, Operations Manager for Honolulu Habitat for Humanity. Next week on Insights, medical aid in dying is now the law of the land. How does this new law work, and how are doctors and care professionals dealing with it? I'm Daryl Huff for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Ahui ho.